We are live.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to do our East Lansing Study Committee on Independent Police Oversight Commission meeting here on Monday, February 22nd.
Chuck, you're going in and out again.
How's that? Is that a little bit better?
Nope, can't hear you.
Is this a little bit better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I apologize. So we're doing our Study Committee on Independent Police Oversight Commission meeting Monday, the 22nd of February, 2021. Thank you all for joining us. And Diane, can you please start us off with roll call?
Sure. Kathy Boyle.
Kathy Boyle, attending remotely from East Lansing, Michigan, Ingham County.
Sade Callwood. Kelly Ellsworth Etchison.
Kelly Ellsworth Etchison, attending remote from East Lansing, Ingham County.
Chuck Grigsby.
Doug Grigsby, East Lansing, Michigan, Ingham County.
Cedric Harrow.
Cedric Harrow, attending virtually from Mason, Michigan, Ingham County.
Helen Josephson.
Helen Josephson, attending virtually from East Lansing, Ingham County, Michigan.
Chris Root.
Attending virtually from East Lansing, Ingham County, present.
Sharon Reed Davis. Quentin Tyler.
Sorry, my stuff is like muted. What's going on? Yeah. So Quentin Tyler, Lexington, Kentucky.
Hey, say that one more time, Quentin. Sorry.
Quentin Tyler from Lexington, Kentucky.
Thanks. Eric Williams.
Eric Williams, East Lansing, Ingham County.
Ron Bacon.
Ron Bacon, attending virtually, present, East Lansing, Michigan, Ingham County, or Clinton County.
Sade Callwood.
Sade Callwood, attending virtually from Douglas, Massachusetts, Worcester County.
Okay, I did not see Sharon, and Noel Garcia Jr. is unable to attend tonight.
Thank you, Diane. We have quorum, and we'll move to item 1.2, assuming everyone can hear me pretty good. So I'll look for an entertaining motion for February 22nd, 2021 to approve of the agendas tonight.
So moved.
The agenda. This is Chris Root.
Moved by Vice Chair Root and seconded, I believe, by Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? So moved. Same thing, we'll move to item 1.3, approval of the minutes of 2/8/2021. Assuming there's no edits or changes to that, I'll look for a motion for approval as well.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Moved by Commissioner Ellsworth Edison and seconded by Commissioner Boyle. I think I saw there. Is there any discussion on those minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. All right, we'll move to item 1.4, written communications. Well, we have a couple of items here that are pertaining to our discussion that we have going on overall. I wanted to know if there's anyone who wanted to speak to the written communication or had any comments if you were one of the authors of that communication. All right, no discussion on written communication this evening? All right, we'll move on. All right, we'll move to item 1.5, pursuant to MCL 15.263 subsection 1, limiting public comment to 5 minutes per individual for today's electronic meeting. Is there anyone who wants to entertain that motion to enforce the 5-minute rule?
I move that rule for tonight's meeting.
Moved by Vice Chair Root, seconded by Commissioner Josephson. Is there any discussion on the 5-minute limit per individual this evening? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, so moved. All right, communication from us, from the audience. Do we have anyone on the line, Justin?
Yes, we do. The attendee in the queue is joining by Zoom with the name Elena. You may address the committee or say pass.
Hi, my name's Elena. I'm glad to be joining today to hear what's being discussed.
Thank you, Elena. Did you want to make any comment tonight?
No comment as of right now.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining us. Is there anyone else on the line by chance, Justin?
Nope.
All right, let us get to work tonight, huh? All right, so we'll move to new business. We have none on new business, and we'll go to old business. Item 4 on the agenda, 4.1. What we have tonight is complaints review process and composition of commission. I know we did discuss a little bit of the composition last week, but I just want to make sure we were kind of in consensus with that. And then maybe focus on complaints for a little bit of time tonight, if in fact that's where we're at with this discussion for item 4.1. Okay, so we're going to focus on specifically for our discussion tonight on complaints. Is what I'm thinking that we got going on, or did anyone have any comments on that? Okay, so we are looking at the recommendations that we have continuing on that Commissioner Callwood and Commissioner Williams put together for us, and then specifically the complaint portions. We talked about this, really reviewing at the very least the first 6 pages of that summary so we can have in-depth discussion. Did anyone, I'll go ahead and open it up to anyone who had any comments or reactions to this discussion of that. Everyone was happy with it. There was anything that you wanted to like maybe highlight, talk about? Okay, there we go. Are we warming up now? Okay. All right, Commissioner Haro and then Commissioner Boyle, please go ahead.
I just picked out a couple of points where I think we need a little more clarity of language. We need to define things more clearly. Just as a few examples, on page 4, the investigation is completed in 90 days unless it is unusually complex, right? So I think we need some criteria. Who gets to define what complex is? Similarly, on page 5, the commission will collect information about criminal cases involving minor charges, right? So again, how are we defining minor charges? Who gets to define those things? Most of my comments are in that vein, just keeping an eye on making sure that things are more clearly defined, just to remove a lot of that potential ambiguity, right? I think we probably know what we're talking about, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's getting conveyed to the body that will be formed and then to the general public.
Thank you, Commissioner Haro. Just to respond so we don't lose that, I know Commissioner Boyle's next. When you, I guess my direct question to you is, when you think of the word complex, just for context for what we're talking about, what comes to mind to me is maybe something that's high profile, maybe something that is a situation that causes, use of force, and there's some unknowns in there and things like that. What comes to mind when you think about complex?
I think there's clearly going to be some element of media coverage, right? Anything that might complicate the process of investigation. So certainly those types of high profile events, things where information might have gotten out potentially before the department itself has had a chance to even review things. Anything that I think would be incredibly complex, I would think would be obvious. So cases where there is severe injury or death, any death in custody or something along those lines. My concern is more sort of all that gray area in the middle, where, I can see us getting, well, not us specifically, but I can see people getting into conversations about, well, I think this deserves more than 90 days because I think it's complex. And the response is, well, this seems fairly routine, so it doesn't need more than 90 days. And I don't know how those things get resolved unless we have specific criteria for what complex means.
And I would assume that because it's something that we haven't seen or the commission will have seen, I mean, the ones who would be able to see that information and maybe make that determination would probably be what, the police chief and the city manager, or you think it's something different from that, just off the top of the head?
From an emotional standpoint, right? Anybody who is involved in terms of being the recipient of police behavior is going to assume that this is a complex matter that deserves probably more than 90 days. So that might be something where, yeah, the city manager is best suited to make that decision.
Yes, and we will, I promise, Commissioner Boyle, I just wanted to get some clarification on that. I'll please go ahead and let you go, and I believe Councilmember Bacon wanted to chime in.
Thank you. I've got quite a few notes on this draft, and I don't know as I want to go through them all right here. I do have a question about the drafting process. I think this is it's a lot of material covered in this section 4. I think this is a terrific job of putting things together. And I'm very pleased that it includes, and I think I mentioned this at our last meeting, input on practices, training, and policy, as well as the opportunity for mediation, which I think is great. But that said, I have some specific drafting suggestions. Is there a way we could just share things like that with the drafter and not actually go through the committee process tonight on that?
I believe so. We kind of had kind of like a system like that in place kind of already. We just haven't really got to this point of this much content to go over and really have it really be substantial amount of information to kind of really look at and say, hey, look, I want to be able to kind of chime in on this. But if anyone is thinking differently about that, I just know that we were really concerned about making sure that everything was transparent and open to everyone, but one-to-one contact and talking about things without making decisions, as long as we're in that realm, as you probably know better than I do when it comes to that, I think we're just fine. If anyone wants to chime in on that, please do it. Go ahead. Yes, Vice Chair Root.
Cedric was talking about, having clarity on definitions. It's kind of a definitional question here about what are editing ideas. If we need to capitalize Freedom of Information Act, that's not anything that needs discussion, or changing, a word. But this is a great time, I think, to have conversation in the group about anything that involves a substantive question. Like there's a section on who all can receive complaints. If people think that something on that list doesn't belong, I would consider that to be the kind of thing we could discuss. Because at some point, we're going to need to vote on all of this content. And so the more we can work together over time to get agreement about chunks of it, the closer we'll be to getting agreement on the whole. So, yeah, my thought.
Yes, Councilmember Bacon, thank you for being patient.
Yeah, just to address the original question and to preserve the independence of the commission, I say all issues would come into the queue in the standard queue, and then the commission would make the determination whether it's complex or whatever standards you want to place on what's coming in. I don't think it can be no one else would have any input on. That's the independence. That's how I view the independence of the commission as far as how they view the incident or what's going on. I think that would be an important part to determine if that's the kind of independence you want, or if you want other people to have input on how long. I think that's the bigger question. But everything would probably come in that standard cube. And then if more information comes in, you'd be like, this happens to be a lot more complex than we initially perceived it. We're going to need X amount of time versus the standard 90 days. And that way that flexibility is there and you're not boxing them in to a set of rules per se. But we could create some standard rules, but I want them to have the independence because, things tend to emerge or continue to develop over time. So give them that a little bit of autonomy on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Bacon. Just to respond to that, and I think if I understand you correctly, what it comes to mind is that these internal investigations, there's no release of information until everything's complete. And so as a body, it's kind of really hard to know, a lot of that just based off the way the nature of the investigation goes into. So I was just curious how were you addressing that with what you just said, or could you help me out with that issue?
Well, they're just that they be independent. Nobody can dictate to them when they're done, or if they have satisfaction, they could create a report and generate that. But I would perceive that they could leave it open. Like we can't come to terms that all this has to be determined, I guess is what I'm saying. But there's no guarantee that 90 days is enough, or 120 days, or what if it's a year long something that's stretching out over the course of a year. We haven't got determinations from the courts or something else that you need to make proper. That's how I view it. They have as much, they're independent. So as much independence we can grant them as possible.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle, then Commissioner Rowe, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of things to start out. One is in the complaint process, and I'm looking at what is page 3 of my printout. It says as to the form that is going to be used for filing of complaints, that the form will ask the person complaining if they're complaining about an individual officer, about a policy or practice. I'm going to suggest instead that the form asks what actions the person is complaining about, and not require them to decide or identify whether it's the person they're complaining about or departmental policy. And I think it would be easier to investigate the complaints if we have detail about what things happened that the person wants to complain about. So that's a suggestion of how I would change this. I know that one is definitely more than editing, but that's definitely a suggestion of where I think it would clarify things for the complaint process and also help the complainant in formulating their complaint.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle. Please go ahead, Commissioner Harrell.
I think a lot of this is a front end problem, right? If we're envisioning the sort of hybrid review system, which is what we seem to be leaning toward, right? Then the complaint comes in and the commission is not doing the investigation, right? It's the police department doing the investigation. So when that complaint comes in, the commission has relatively little information on which to make this basis of is this complex or not, right? So I understand Councilmember Bacon's point, right? That as the police investigation is ongoing, the council might say, or the committee might say, that this is taking longer than we expected. But I think we can probably define some cut points to say that if this is the case, it is very likely that an investigation will take longer than 90 days. Under these particular circumstances, if there is a corresponding criminal investigation by the county prosecutor, then that investigation will take priority and the committee will take longer than 90 days, right? There has to, I think there needs to be, from a standpoint of transparency, some markers in there for the public to be able to look at to say, all right, this isn't just completely open-ended where the committee is flying by the seat of their pants and decides, all right, we need more time because whatever.
Yeah, and I'm in the same vein with you as you put it earlier in regards to kind of really them kind of waiting to see if this is something that is going to be. I got a quick question for Deputy Chief Gonzalez or Chief Johnson. when you think about the 90 days for most complaints that you get in, I know every situation is different, but I mean, do you feel like for most complaints that you've dealt with, the 90 days is a period of time that allows you to do what you do and then be able to get that turned around for the community's consumption?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Yeah, we have the 90 days is gives us it's ample time. It gives us a great opportunity to do our investigation and things like that. And by our policy and by our contracts and things, we really work hard to make sure we get it done within 90 days. But there are certain situations where I can actually extend that for different reasons, for criminal investigation or the complexity of it and things like that. So I do have that ability to make those extensions. And so in these particular situations, just a communication with the commissioner of the chair of the oversight group, we can easily extend that just because we need more time and things like that. But normally we can get almost all of them done within 90 days.
Thank you, Chief Johnson. Commissioner Williams, I think I saw your hand, and then Commissioner Callwood.
There's a short description of the recommendations in that narrative section, and then the recommendations themselves are in a longer piece. And when you're talking about that 90-day period, the 3-month period for completing an investigation, that would be in number 55. And number 55 in the complaint section there's a comment to number 55, and the comment notes that 90-day rule comes from the police department's policies. And so just as Chief Johnson said, the normal period is 90 days, and there are some things that the chief would look at to determine whether they need longer than 90 days. So it basically comes back to Chief Johnson, what complex means.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Please, Commissioner Callwood, go ahead.
Just kind of comment on just like the 90 days. I wonder if maybe if it's deemed necessary to extend the investigation beyond 90 days, if it's not already in the recommendations, perhaps requesting that the police department provide a summary of what's been concluded so far, or like at least where they are in that process. I think that might, again, open up those channels for transparency that we're talking about, that's necessary between the public and the police department. So I wonder if they're not able to conclude at 90 days, at least providing the Oversight Commission with a summary, if that's not already in the recommendations.
Thank you, Commissioner Callwood. Did anyone else have their hand and wanted to chime in? I may have missed you. Yes, Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison, and then Commissioner Williams, please go ahead.
Mine was regarding the data and the budget. So there was a section in there on the data that the commission would collect data and would have discretion to hire a data analyst to then thereby analyze the data. And I'm trying to wrap my brain around what that would look like, because it seems like you would have to hire someone to collect the data and then analyze it, as opposed to the commission collects data and then you hire someone to analyze the data. You're probably, however the commission is collecting data, is going to probably most likely be in some different model than what the person analyzing the data can even get through their analyzing part. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around. And I know this was based on the model that Albany, New York is using. And so maybe that came from there. So I don't know if anyone can speak to that, but that was like a concern of how that would work, the mechanics and the nuances of how that would work. The other question I had was about the budget. There was a statement in there that talked about, I think City Council would allocate some funds to the commission and then also allocate some funds to the police department to help the commission's work. But it was kind of a broad statement and thinking that there might need to be a little bit more narrowing down of what that budgeted amount might look like, as opposed to there will be some funding available. So those were a couple of comments that I had on that part.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellsworth. That's just in. Did anyone want to respond to that? No, Commissioner Williams is up next. He may be able to respond to some of that as well in his response. Commissioner Williams, please go ahead.
I really don't know anything about data collection or budgets, and if anybody else out there does know know more about that area, then I think they should give the specifics that's lacking in the draft, because I don't know what I'm talking about when I say collect data.
Thank you.
I think Kelly at some point said that she works with data a lot, and maybe if you have some more precise formula for that, that would be good. There was another question in there. With respect to Sade's comment, the section 55B says this: if the police department cannot complete an investigation of a public mistreatment complaint within 90 days, the department will notify the commission and explain the circumstances. I don't know if you would need anything more specific than that.
That's good.
Do you have anything else you wanted to respond to or say, Commissioner Williams, before I move on to?
No.
Okay, Commissioner Rowe and then Councilmember Bacon, please go ahead.
I think the data analysis question is a far broader question. And so I just want to table this until a little later in the evening. I think Vice Chair Root probably has a couple of other questions about questions. And so I think we may want to sort of accomplish a few things before we start going into the weeds on that issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Rowe. Councilman Bacon, please go ahead.
Yeah, to build off Commissioner Caldwood's point as well, I think it should be, if it's 90 days and then they would let you know why there's extenuating circumstances to extend beyond, then at 30 days, there needs to be other checkpoints. I don't think that'd be the last checkpoint. If it's dragging out beyond 120 days, there should be checkpoints along the way where there are reports or updates or something like that to keep the transparency and the level of communication going with the community. So if anyone in the community is asking questions at 120, at 270, at whatever, you have the most up-to-date information to answer those questions and speak to the progress of what's going on or what's holding it up. I don't want the commission kind of look in the dark like they don't know and looking, that can never happen, to keep the integrity and the, kind of how the community is going to view the commission and its independence. So we need other checkpoints.
All right, thank you. Any more comments? Please, Vice Chair Root.
On two different subjects. One is that on the budget, I kind of thought we might hold that until a little later, when we've gone through more of the substance of what we think the Oversight Commission will be doing, and also how the ELPD will be working with the Oversight Commission. Then we'll have a better sense of what the budget would be for. And we'll obviously need some input from staff at that point as well. And we have to take into account the budget process that happens every year. That, we have to comply with. The other topic, I wanted to go back to the topic Kathy was raising about the complaint form. And I had two thoughts. One is agreeing with Kathy that it may not be clear at the very beginning whether the complaint is about policy or about an individual, or indeed it may be both. And one of the determinations that can be made according to the current complaint process is that a policy review is needed as a result of this complaint. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect is I keep asking myself, once we put on paper what the Oversight Commission will do, how it will operate, what would that mean in terms of the two high visible cases that we had the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020? I think there is still debate in the community about whether that was those were complaints about the individual officer and or complaints about the policy. So it's the use of force that involved injuries to the face. So I do think it can be difficult to know that at the beginning. And indeed, it could be both. Another thing I wanted to raise about the complaint form, we have a complaint form that is part of a court settlement. And part of that court settlement, it's got the form, it's got how it can be redacted in a FOIA. Do we have the option of changing that complaint form, number one? And even if we have the option, is there value in having that court order about requiring that the complaint form be released with certain redactions? So I'm not sure whether we can actually move, or whether we can, or whether we would want to move away from the complaint form we have. And I'd love comments from and people with knowledge about that legal question.
Yes, Commissioner Boyle. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner or Vice Chair Root about deferring the discussions about the budget and finances until we get the procedure firmed up. I think the question of the settlement and the complaint process pursuant to the settlement, perhaps we need a brief memo from either the city manager or the city attorney regarding when the settlement process is applicable and how that might interface with this commission's work. It might be that we have to use that form, it might not be, but I think that's probably something for the city attorney to advise us regarding. Another thing that I noticed in the complaint process on 41, and I'm just sort of trying to keep discussions moving forward, is mediation of a complaint. Again, I think that's an excellent idea. I like to see that used to the extent possible. I would suggest, however, that if the parties agree to mediation, that the complaint would not be closed, because sometimes mediation fails and you don't get an agreement. So I think if there's mediation, that should maybe pause the complaint process. If mediation resolves it, we close the complaint. But if it doesn't close it, then I think the rest of the complaint process should be available to the complainant for a determination regarding the situation.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle. For that specific conversation, is there any more response? Because my question is a little bit different in nature when it comes to that, but I just want to make sure we didn't lose some of that concern about the details of the actual complaint form and all that. Yes, Commissioner Williams.
One concern I had on kind of a broader level was the fact that we tend to lose disciplinary complaints. I mean, police officers tend to be exonerated when they are disciplined. But we can, to the extent that we can translate a disciplinary complaint into a policy issue, that might be more advantageous for the commission to pursue a complaint as a policy matter rather than to go down the rabbit hole of employee discipline. That's why I kind of wrote it so that at various points in the process, you know, the complainant or the police chief or the investigator or the commission could divert it from the disciplinary track to a policy track. So however we redesign that complaint form, whether we ask the court for a variance or not, it would be good to have in there an option to get the complainant thinking about, well, is your complaint against that officer, or do you think the whole department needs to excuse me, dog, needs to redesign its procedures? That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Vice Chair Rue, did you want to respond?
Yeah. There might be different expectations or interests of different parties. An individual complainant might want it pursued as a complaint involving what happened to him or her by a particular officer. People on the Oversight Commission who are reviewing it may think that it raises policy issues that perhaps they've learned about through looking at a couple complaints that have come past them for review. And the Oversight Commission would have the opportunity to make policy recommendations regardless of whether the complaint, the complaint doesn't have to be transformed into a policy category complaint for the Oversight Commission to make recommendations, I think, because the Oversight Commission, this hybrid idea that we have, the Oversight Commission can make can make recommendations on policy matters that it deems important or that, people from the public bring to them, or that they learn from a pattern or even a single complaint. You're absolutely right, Eric, that most complaints are resolved in favor of the officer all over the country. I'm not sure that means we don't have to investigate them, and the ELPD has to go through that process, and the Oversight Commission will have to too. But that doesn't keep us from dealing with it as a policy matter as well.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Boyle, please go ahead.
Thanks for those comments, Chris. And I think that's partly why I'm thinking that if we ask the complainant to focus on the actions that they're complaining of, that helps the commission and the police department focus their attention on what, if anything, went wrong, whether it was the actions of the individual officer or training of the individual officer, which is another possibility, or the officer following departmental policy and the policies having an impact that we didn't foresee and maybe should be changed. So if the complaints can focus on the actions, then the commission itself can consider both the individual actors' responsibility and any changes in policy or training that might be indicated by what we find out during the process of the complaint.
I just want to add a quick question to add on to that. Well, maybe not question, but I read through the summary a little bit, and it said a little bit about the process was that once it gets to the police chief, they're going to do an investigation to see if it's an individual actor or like a bigger, larger thing. So do you think we should do both, like where we change that form to make it specify on the form before giving it to the police to do that? Or should we just let the police make that decision because they know the training that the officers go through and that sort of thing?
I think Vice Chair Rue, did you kind of address that a little bit about the person? I can't remember who was talking about it, but they had said that sometimes is unknown by the complainant, but I may have missed that. Is that what is that kind of how you said that? It's kind of a little bit confusing. And sometimes the complainant may not be able to make that determination, is what I got from that. To respond to your inquiry, Commissioner Josephson. Did you want to say that a little bit better, Vice Chair?
Well, it might be useful to talk, to hear from either the chief or deputy chief on how they see those investigations developing and how those decisions get made.
Can I just ask a couple of quick questions here?
Please.
Is there a step in which you would want staff's feedback on some of these things? Because some of them have a nuance to it that I don't know if is being caught. For instance, it says, about the complaint. Do you envision that all complaints will go to this commission for a full review of all of the investigatory material prior to the chief ever making a recommendation or making his final determination? Will that be internal investigations or only citizen-driven complaints? And then it says there'll be an all-volunteer, all-civilian board with a separate office from the police department and city hall. I don't think you mean a physically separate office or a physical office, right? But typically these things are staffed by, boards and commissions are staffed by employees of the city. So it really wouldn't be separate. The board members would be independent of that, but the staff and the support of it and the office would all be a part of the city organization, and all that has budget implications. So how that happens. And then there are other things like the lobbyist, the use of a professional lobbyist that we'd have to sort of align, because I would argue that if the board wanted to make recommendations on a policy advocacy thing to council, that would be the appropriate step, because you could see council saying, well, we don't agree with you. And now the city's lobbyist who's hired by council is working on behalf of the board, but maybe contrary to what the council wants. So it seems like there has to be alignment there where they would make a recommendation on a lobbying issue to the council. The council would then direct the lobbyist. But just things like that, are you looking for, so I have some questions about that and how that would all work out. Do you want feedback in total on this? Do you want this, how do you want to proceed with that?
I think running dialogue as we talk about these things in real time, those questions for us to either think about or consider is my humble opinion. And I may be alone in that, but I'd love to hear if anyone else has anything to say to that, so we can kind of have a better feel to being able to get to the point of recommendations that really make sense. Commissioner Williams, please go ahead.
Well, we have a draft written out, so my suggestion would be that people email or send in written comments for the critiques and changes, and do it in writing rather than in this rolling discussion.
But do you mean from staff at this point? Or
yeah,
is this where you want the feedback from staff about sort of thoughts and input from this perspective now?
That would be my suggestion.
Okay, great.
And better to do it in writing than,
we can do that.
These conversations just kind of aren't as targeted as they should be.
Yeah, we certainly could do that in writing.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. That makes sense. I think I missed Commissioner Haro, Councilman Bacon. If you could just hold for a quick second and let him go ahead and go. I apologize for that.
I just wanted to have a quick discussion of process, right? So that my suggestion is, if we are discussing complaints for the bulk of our time here, that we simply take Eric and Sade's document and start with, bullet point number 53, and then go through each point and have a discussion about, do we all agree on this point? Okay, yes, let's move on, rather than sort of flitting around that section.
I like it. I'm going to let Councilman Bacon go ahead and chime in on his comment before we kind of see how we want to do that just real quickly.
Yeah, I agree with that, if you guys want to get into that part of it. But to George's point, I think it would be, say it's something that's coming from the state. They do their investigation. It comes back to you guys. You disagree. You'd create some type of dissent or disagree. We disagree with these findings, yada, yada. And we'd like this to happen. And that would probably come to council. You'd be able to generate some to keep your independence. We do not agree with this outcome or this decision or this, that, or the other. And we want, here's our recommendations, change in policy. And maybe it's nothing even that chief or deputy chief do. It could be something from the state or something from there. And then that would move. That could be something we could escalate. I think you just give them as broad of powers or whatever to do that. And then that stuff would come to council as a recommendation that even for our lobbyists to pursue something at a state level or whatever. Like, I wouldn't take any of that stuff off the table, but I'll step aside so you guys can get into the kind of uniform part of what you're going to do now.
Thank you, Councilmember Bacon. Any other comments in regards to maybe the functionality of how we're going to discuss this based off Commissioner Hero's suggestion? All right. So just so I'm with you guys and understanding everything, what we want to do is go through the line items here that we have listed tonight and just kind of make sure we have a general consensus of that. If we don't, maybe people can speak to it then. Is that what I'm understanding that you suggested, Commissioner Rowe? Starting with 53?
Yep.
All right. Does everyone have a copy of that? Do I need to read that out loud so you can have? Okay, Justin's going to put it up there for me. Thank you, Justin. So here we are. We have complaints. We've been talking about that kind of in different areas, and people have been chiming in. And based off the suggestion from Commissioner Rowe, we have really uniformed here for item 53, who may file for a complaint. Any person may file a complaint, including but not limited to residents, non-residents, city employees, police department employees, police department supervisors, and the commission. Vice Chair Root, please go ahead.
I have a question about the phrase "and the commission." I think this is the only place in the draft where it talks about a complaint about the commission. And it seems to me that if there's a complaint about the commission, it probably would need to be handled very differently from these other complaints. Who would consider a complaint about the commission? Presumably it wouldn't be the commission. So I would suggest taking it out of that section. And if it's needed, maybe I missed it, Eric, maybe it is someplace else, but I don't recall that being actually described anywhere else.
That's a list of people who can file complaints.
Right.
And the commission is on the list of the people that can file complaints.
Oh, okay.
Not file a complaint against the commission, but the commission can file a complaint.
You're right. I got that wrong.
So with this, just to let you guys know cosmetically, while we have this on screen, I can only see a section of you. So if, if you do want to say something and I don't recognize you, please just go ahead and chime in if you will, but then make sure you announce who you are just for adult keeping and things like that. I believe Commissioner Rowe is who I saw who wanted to chime in to what we're talking about now for item 53.
Eric made my point that this was just about who might originate a complaint.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, can you explain why the commission might want to use the complaint system rather than communicating in other ways?
I certainly wouldn't want to bar them from doing it. Somebody on a future commission might want to proceed in that way.
To Eric's point, to me, it just provides options.
Okay.
That was by Commissioner Tyler that chimed into Commissioner Williams and Vice Chair Root's original question. I think I don't know if anyone's there who wants to chime in even more. I think we're kind of in consensus to that. And we can move on to 54. Okay. So places where complaints may be filed, obviously, the following offices and persons are approved to accept complaints from the public. I'm only reading, it's not that you guys can't see it, but I just want to make sure the public has the opportunity to understand where we're at and what we're talking about. 1, city manager, 2, police department, 3, director of human resources, 4, diversity, equity, inclusion administrator, 5, city council, 6, human relations commission, which is the human rights commission, 7, the police oversight commission. B, the commission may approve other offices or persons with whom the public mistreatment complaints may be filed. And then there's a comment there, giving members of the public multiple locations where they may file complaints will give members of the public an opportunity to file a complaint at the place that is convenient or trusted. Does anyone have anything they have to say about that section 54? Commissioner Harrell, I believe, and then Vice Chair Root.
We just need to clarify if we're talking about physical locations where each one of these offices is going to have a paper copy of these forms, or is there going to be a common website link on the website of each of these offices? Right. We're still talking potentially about populations that don't have consistent access to the web, don't have consistent access to technology.
In short, both. Vice Chair Root?
I feel a concern that there are 3 public bodies on this list. So it's more than 25 individuals. And it seems to me that there's an opportunity for slippage that we don't want to create, that this is just an awful lot of people who could receive complaints. I think, the idea of creating an oversight commission certainly suggests that the oversight commission should be a place where you can lodge your complaint, and obviously the police department. I'm glad to see the diversity, equity, and inclusion administrator there, but my inclination, I'd be curious what other people think about whether maybe taking city council and human relations commission out. City council will have other roles in this, but that just seems to me a whole lot of people.
Yep,
Any reactions from any commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison.
I could agree with that. Removing city council and the human relations commission.
This is Commissioner Tyler. Only objection I have is that some folks may be used to the Human Relations Commission as the point of contact.
I was going to second that and say, just on the people are, especially also city council, I know a lot of people are used to like that being like the main thing. It's going to take a little bit for people to just direct all their complaints here. I don't necessarily see the harm in like another opportunity for people's complaints to be heard through those outlets.
Any other comments in regards to looking at 54? Yes, Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison. Thank you, Commissioner Joseph, just to recognize your name.
The only concern I have with that is it's kind of like in the private sector where you have a CEO retiring and you've got a new CEO that you're hired, and there's just this little bit of overlap where they're transferring knowledge, right? Is the longer you have that old CEO there, people will never go to the new CEO. And so I think that you just have to cut that, cord and introduce people to this new committee, this new commission by which they should be lodging those complaints with. And so those that are used to the Human Relations Commission is because we haven't had the Police Oversight Commission, but I think that we need to make sure we're introducing them to that. Otherwise, they'll never switch over.
I'm torn with this. I'm with Commissioner Tyler just based off our participation, and then I hear Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison weigh in on it. And I think I'm going to lean more to what Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison is talking about, and I think Vice Chair Root is the fact that, like, for example, the Human Rights Commission, handles protected classes and issues, that sometimes involve housing issues. But then we also have a housing commission. And so, sometimes it kind of gets a little confusion about where you file that. And, That would be my only reason why I would have concerns, so we wouldn't make it another step or difficult for the complainant to file and have that confusion would be the only reason why I would want to give that up as far as the Human Relations or Human Rights Commission being involved. I believe I saw a hand before I opened my mouth. Commissioner Tyler, please go ahead.
Yeah, so Chuck, maybe we have a period of transition, so folks, we can transition to that. But also, we don't want anybody to get discouraged. We talk about tradition and the fact that some people may be used to the Human Relations Commission, then all of a sudden get frustrated because, they haven't transitioned to these other options that are available.
Absolutely. A transition period definitely is going to be, I think, automatic because just the 5-year history, going on 6-year history of them dealing with that. Commissioner Harrell?
Do we have some sense of how any of these types of complaints come in now? By which I mean, right, if people are physically coming into an office and filling out a piece of paper, that's one thing. But if these complaints are coming to the HRC via a website or an email, that's a fairly simple process to make that transition where we're just going to automatically funnel that to what is now the new appropriate repository for that.
I think the chief could probably speak about that and how complaints come. You mean police internal complaints, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So chief, do they normally come to the police desk or make a call and then meet with someone who provides them a form?
Yes, we have all that stuff right at the police department, and they can even make a complaint over the phone or in person. The supervisor on duty is responsible for gathering that information and point of contact before they get off shift at the time they get their initial complaint. And so we have all that stuff, and we're used to that concept. So we have forms. Our cadets know how to process that information, and all of our supervisors know how to deal with that. And to our recollection, we have not had a lot of complaints that have come from the HRC in the past. So it's not like we have a lot coming through that group anyway. That commission has been aware of certain things and they wanted some inquiries on it, but a lot of citizen complaints have not directly come to them and then to us. So just for your information, background information on that.
Vice Chair Rue. Thank you, Chief Johnson.
About 3 years ago, the police chief and deputy chief invited the HRC to become another way that citizens could file complaints, and the HRC did not take them up on it. So if folks are talking about a transition, the transition is from you only can file this with the police through the various methods of the website or the desk or, talking to a supervisor. So no matter what we do, we're going to be expanding who people can leave a complaint with. The HRC has been doing an annual review of complaints, but they actually decided not to become a channel for complaints. My recollection of their reasoning was that they didn't really have any role in what they would do with them, except they would get them and give them to the police. And that was something they decided not to do.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Boyle, excuse me.
Thank you. I think it's a good idea to narrow the number of offices and persons approved to accept complaints. And I think we should do that and then further provide that in the event that any other office or person in the city government receives a complaint, that the complainant be referred to one of the above offices. So if a complaint comes into human relations, then human relations promptly refers that person to the city manager, the police department, or the police oversight commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle. And I think that helps us wrap up this section. And so we can move on. Unless someone else had something to say in regards to the list. All right, we'll move to section 55, processing public mistreatment complaints. There's quite a bit there. I hate to read it all out to you guys, but section A is when a public mistreatment complaint is accepted at an approved location, the person responsible for accepting the complaint will document receipt of the complaint keep a copy of the complaint and forward the complaint as soon as possible to police department administration and the commission. B, the police department will investigate each public mistreatment complaint. The department will attempt to complete the investigation within 90 days. If the police department cannot complete an investigation of the public mistreatment complaint within 90 days, the department will notify the commission and explain the circumstances. And then it has some links there. And we kind of really talked about this in depth earlier. Does anyone else have anything that they want to add to this discussion of 55 based off what we've said already to this?
Kathy Boyle here.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering, do we need the word mistreatment in there as opposed to just public complaints?
Commissioner Williams, you want to respond to that?
It's an awkward phrase, and maybe it should be rephrased, but it's defined in the first or second section. And it's intended to mean a complaint where somebody in the police department or the police department has mistreated a member of the public. So public modifies mistreatment, and it doesn't modify complaint. So there are complaints against police officers, for example, for taking too long a lunch. That would not be a complaint where the public has been mistreated. And complaints like that are not out within the jurisdiction of the commission. So any way we can say that in a more felicitous way would be fine, but the phrase is meant to capture all complaints where the police department has mistreated a member of the public, complaints from whatever source.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. I think Commissioner Joseph wants to respond as well.
Potentially, instead of the word mistreat, could we play off the word ethical, like maybe like something to do with ethics as opposed to mistreatment? Because I don't want the public to be discouraged if it's not like, they might think of it as like a physical mistreatment or something more specific than just a general complaint that they might have. So maybe if we use ethics, I might be able to widen the scope a little bit.
Thank you, Commissioner Joseph. I'm curious to hear Commissioner Boyle's response to those two different responses to your statement. If you had anything to say.
Yes, I guess, I was seeing this as possibly limiting and eliminating and possibly eliminating a complaint which the commission might otherwise want to review, because the complainant looks at this and says, well, this isn't really mistreatment. I'm not saying I was hit, and they didn't end up ticketing me in the end, but I didn't like the way they behaved, and so then they don't file a complaint. And that's fine if we want to limit it in that way. I guess my question is, do we really want to say mistreatment in the description and possibly narrow what we're going to look at? So, but it's fine if we want to leave it in there. It's just, it narrows it certainly. And I think there might be some people who would not file a complaint because they wouldn't see what they're complaining about as mistreatment.
If there's a better word, I'd like to, I'm glad to entertain it.
Well,
Commissioner Williams.
Again, if I could, I would again say, if we focus it on the activities or actions of the police, if that's what the complaint focuses on, then it could be processing a public complaint regarding police activities.
Now that would bring in the guy that you see during working hours eating donuts.
It would, and the commission doesn't have to review these, do they?
Yes, they do.
Well, I mean, I don't.
They're tracked.
They're tracked, but
feel like that's
Well-
one that would be reviewed and passed off. Like, I don't think that's the point of the commission to focus on that. But I would agree that that mistreatment word definitely narrows the scope to a lot of people who might be discouraged from sending in a complaint, which is the last thing that we want to have happen.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Haro wanted to chime in, and then Vice Chair Root. Please go ahead.
So I think we also need to remember that this document and the wording of this document is for the council and the future oversight body, right? So the general public is not going to be reading this thinking, you know, what the heck does a public treatment complaint mean? So we can discuss internal terminology. I think Eric made the point that the first thing that happens in the document is these definitions, right? And public mistreatment complaint is defined as excessive use of force and all these other things that get us to what that definition is, right? You know, where we need clarity in language is the public facing language.
Thank you, Commissioner Haro. Is there any final comments in regards to this discussion? I believe Vice Chair Root was up next.
I think the way we'll know what we're talking about, we're maybe not yet at the point of knowing the exact best language to use. But I think if we could talk about which complaints are we talking about, that might help us get clarity. What the HRC reviews now is all complaints from the public and all administrative internal complaints as well. And there are not that many. And the document that Eric has written does allow for different levels of review. You know, or maybe it's the Albany one that does. I don't remember the exact language, but I think the Oversight Commission would have the opportunity to request additional information about certain kinds of complaints. You know, we don't have to review body camera on every complaint, for example. We, meaning the Oversight Commission. So I tend to think we don't want to reduce the oversight that we have now, unless there's a real clear reason. And that could also be worked out later, but I think I would hate to reduce it from where we are. So my inclination would be to keep the Oversight Commission reviewing all the complaints. And then, in fact, we don't need to worry about another word. And then if in practice, you know, after a couple of years, the decision is made that it's too cumbersome and that it's too difficult to find dividing lines between, you know, which ones to look at longer and more quickly, it could be changed. But that's another way of looking at it.
Thank you, Vice Chair and Commissioner Haro. And I think that kind of wraps us up on this particular section in regards to where we're all at with that. Unless someone else had something they needed to add to this before we move on to 56. All right, we'll move on to complaint forms, and we did talk a little bit about this earlier. And just for the public's benefit, I'll go ahead and read this real fast as I can. A commission may establish a standard form for public mistreatment complaints and any other complaints that come from the public. B, if a complaint is verbal, the person who accepts the complaint may help the complainant put the complaint in writing on a form approved by the commission. C, the commission's standard complaint form will ask the complainant to specify whether the complaint is against an individual officer or against a department practice. And then we have reference points here highlighted. And then there's a summary at the end there. Some complaints from members of the lay public are not really against individual police officers, but against police department patterns or practices. Giving complaints the opportunity to direct their complaints against patterns or practices instead of individual officers may help the investigator get to the real issue. An investigation protocol that automatically triggers a personnel action can be distracting if the real issue involves a pattern or practice. We did talk a little bit about this. Did anyone have more they want to break down in regards to section 56? We're good on that one? All right. Yes, Commissioner, Vice Chair Root.
I think we've already talked a little bit about whether the complainant is in a good position to identify whether this complaint is against an individual officer or policy. And it's coming up again here.
So I know Commissioner Boyle had said something, and then someone else had said something about, I think it was Commissioner Josephson, about kind of really, how to go about that. Commissioner Boyle, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Again, I think if what we ask the complainant to do is to describe what happened that they're complaining about, then we could ask their opinion of is this a procedure, or is this what this particular officer did? I suppose we could ask them that. But I think really that's for us to determine and the department to determine, and may not even be determined until the investigation is well underway as to whether we're talking about the actions of an individual or whether we're talking about training or policy, so procedure. So I would not ask the complainant to make that choice. And again, I would stress that the complainant set forth what happened that they're complaining about.
I'm in agreement with that personally. Does anyone else have any more comment? Yes, Commissioner Williams.
I just wanted to push you a little bit on that. And, I think there are some complainants who are intelligent enough to have an idea about what they want to come out of their complaint. Do they want the guy fired, or do they want the police department to change the way it operates? And some people may have minds that are acute enough to think about that and give you an intelligent answer. So it's, I wouldn't underestimate that. I wouldn't want to suggest that complainants are incapable of making that distinction, any more capable than we are, or less capable than we are.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Williams. Did you want to chime in, City Manager?
Yeah, I don't think you have to ask them if it's a policy or a person thing to ask them what they want as an outcome. What are they seeking as an outcome? Because, very frequently we think people want to get someone fired, and really what they say is, I want them to say they're sorry, or I want this fixed in some way. And they don't necessarily want someone fired. We always jump to that conclusion. So I think you can ask people, what do they want as an outcome, perhaps? But it doesn't have to get, I do agree with Kathy on that asking them whether it's a procedure or whether the officer did something, they don't need to discern that. We'll figure that out. They may not know if it's a procedure or not.
I think the way George Lahannas put it hits it right on the head. What outcome do you want?
Thank you. Vice Chair Root, please go ahead.
I think another way of getting at that, Eric, that will be new in this recommendation for an oversight commission is to have ways that members of the public can come to the oversight commission and make recommendations, and communicate with the oversight commission about policy concerns that they have. I think that will be something new. And you've got one suggestion in here that people can get a petition with 20 people's names on it. And that means the Oversight Commission has to have a hearing. I think that is brilliant. I think that engages the public in oversight of the police. And, the forming an oversight commission isn't just supposed to engage the current members of the Oversight Commission. It's a way of further engaging the community as well and giving it opportunities for people in the community to raise their concerns. So I thought that was brilliant. And then maybe we can have another really clear, distinct way that people as an individual can express their concerns to the Oversight Commission about policy issues. And have that be very clear. And that can be, you know, on the website of the Oversight Commission and in a brochure and that kind of thing. And then, as you say, there are people who are just as smart as anybody who's going to be on the commission about some issue that they think needs to really be looked at and changed. And they can come directly and say it, but they don't need to use the complaint form, which I think is really designed for something else.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Did I miss you, Commissioner Ellsworth? That's saying I thought maybe I saw your head nod or maybe your hand, but I wasn't sure if I missed it.
No, I was nodding my head in agreement.
Okay. All right. All right. So are we in a good place on 56 and kind of how we want to wrap it up in our discussion for our recommendation? You know, I know we had some different understandings of how that should lay out, but I think Vice Chair Root mentioned and had talked about kind of helps us out with that. Is there any more discussion on 56? Commissioner Boyle, you're good with that so far?
Yes, I think the discussions were very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we're all good in a good place before we move on to 57, sufficient complainant. Again, so A, a public misconduct complaint need not to be filed on an official complaint form to be accepted. B, a public misconduct complaint shall be accepted if it describes an alleged mistreatment in enough detail so that it can be investigated. Reactions to 57, responses, additions, edits? Commissioner Rowe, please go ahead.
My only question is whether or not there would then be some procedure for how a complaint is handled if it is not on an official complaint form, right? Like just again, a greater level of detail for what that means, right? I mean, if someone sends a letter to Chief Johnson saying, hey, I'm complaining about this, you know, this happened to me and I want some resolution, that's obviously not an official complaint form. What then happens next to engage that process?
Yeah, we kind of had a you know, with one of our high profile cases where it was not an official complaint form completed. It was discovered, as some of you guys probably know, via email, and it came across Mayor Stevens's attention, and then he followed up with that. I don't know if that kind of really addresses what you had, but it was very organic, and we just then followed up with the police department, and then we got more information and worked our way backwards. So that's one example that I was a part of. Commissioner Callwood, can you please go ahead?
Under section 56, it does have, like, I know it's maybe a different kind of complaint, but when it's talking about the complaint forms, it does say that if a complaint is verbal, the person who accepts it will help the person put it into writing. So perhaps this could also be done with mistreatment complaints. Public misconduct complaint, rather, so that there is some sort of tracking system as to what happens with it. So even if it's not written, whoever's accepting it can help that individual put it into writing.
Understood. I see that you're, Chief Johnson, did you want to chime in? Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, just a clarification. Currently, what we do, even if someone calls up and says, Kim Johnson was rude to me yesterday when he was walking down the street, and we actually capture their name and information, and we actually complete a complaint form. And that's the only way, that's how we start tracking our investigation. So if it's verbal or written or whatever, we put it all on the same form and we track those, even if it's verbal or someone who's been locked up or anything like that. So they're always captured the same way. So we can actually track those complaints as they go through their investigation. So just a follow up for how we're currently doing business.
And I'm sorry if I missed it or I should know this. So then do you go about the form or do you have your own process when it comes to that?
Yep. Once we get the form, someone says I'm filing a complaint against an employee or against whatever, we actually go through it. We assign a number to it and we start our investigation. We assign that investigation out to a lieutenant or captain or deputy chief, and we go through our investigation. No matter how big or small that is, we we don't make that, I don't make that, no one makes a decision as in that complaint is not important. So we actually investigate all complaints that come through our department, and we actually put them all in the same form so we can actually contract that throughout the investigations.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank
I was
you.
going to say, I think sometimes it could be like a barrier if someone gives you a written letter and then you say you got to put this on another form. It's a barrier to them filing that complaint because they might see that as kind of like, I'm giving it back to you, do something else before you give it to me, where you kind of want to accept whatever they give you so that it doesn't seem like you're trying to push it back on them again. You're just accepting it.
Understood.
That is correct.
Thank you, Chief Johnson and City Manager Lahannas. Any other comments to section 57 pertaining to this particular discussion section? All right, so we're in consensus with that. We'll move on to 58, police-oriented versus disciplinary complaints. A, before the police department assigns a complaint to an investigator, the police chief will determine whether the complaint is more appropriately investigated as a disciplinary matter or as a matter involving department policy or practice. B, the police department will develop and publish separate and appropriate protocols for investigating 1, disciplinary complaints, and 2, complaints alleging deficiencies in the police department policies or practices. And then there's a section for comment item. Some complaints from members of the lay public are not really against individual police officers, but against police department patterns or practices. An investigation protocol that automatically triggers a personnel action can be distracting if the real issue involves a pattern or practice. Under current protocol in the police department, complaints are lodged with the supervisor, logged with the supervisor of the employee who is an apparent target of the complaint, and then just cites East Lansing's Police Department policy and procedures and order number complaint against references. The protocol seems to assume that an individual employee is at fault. Framing the complaint as a disciplinary matter may be unwarranted rather than having an individual supervisor start the investigation. High-level official familiar with the department as a whole should make a preliminary judgment as to whether the complaint is best treated as a disciplinary matter or as a pattern or practice matter. And that is section 58. Reactions, comments, edits? Yes, Commissioner Boyle.
Well, my question on this, I understand the way it's going, but my question on this is, does that help the police department who's going to be investigating the complaint? Does it help them if this determination is made when the complaint comes in? As you know, a determination of whether it's individual misconduct or a policy or practice. So would that help them or not?
That's a question to the commission.
Well, I think it's a question to the chief or the assistant chief.
I don't have an opinion one way or the other. We investigate all of the complaints that come in. And so as the investigation goes on, we actually see if there's a policy violation or employee issue going on. So we actually, as the investigation goes on, we actually start seeing that throughout the investigation, well, or both. It could be going in both directions. So it works for me just because it keeps our options open instead of saying this is going to be a policy issue, and then we start going on this policy route. But it actually turns out it could be an employee issue. And so if we keep it open throughout the investigation, I can make the determination one way or the other, or both, towards the end of the investigation. It doesn't limit me with the direction, because it could go both.
Commissioner Williams, please go ahead. Thank you, Chief Johnson.
One pitfall of the disciplinary track is that everything in a disciplinary file is potentially confidential. And to the extent that we can keep things in the realm of policy and practice, we keep it more public.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Please, City Manager Lahannas, and then Commissioner Boyle, please go ahead.
We just don't want to lose if there's something that someone deserves to be disciplined for. Of course, you don't want to lose that opportunity and push it to say it's a policy issue if it was a misconduct, because then you can't discipline someone for it, and then you don't start, if there's a pattern of behavior or anything like that, right? So that's the only concern. You may recommend policy improvements because of that, but you still may want to look at it from a discipline procedure process.
Commissioner Boyle, thank you, City Manager Lahannas. Commissioner Boyle, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with what Commissioner Williams said, as well as what Mr. Lahannas just said. I think perhaps we could require the determination of whether the complaint is a disciplinary matter or a matter involving departmental policy or practice, or both. But I think the determination needs to be made after the investigation is either completed or else well underway, instead of before the investigation begins.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle. Vice Chair Root, please go ahead.
Just to make a point again, establishing an oversight commission of a hybrid model means that that oversight commission can do more than just review complaints. And if they see a policy issue, they can, make it alive. And so it can be dealt with, can be really discussed and looked into and researched.
Any other comments, reactions, or opinions? It kind of sounds like, and I may be wrong, but we're kind of separate here still a little bit about this, about kind of really this disciplinary part. And I really want to make sure, as Commissioner Williams was talking about earlier, I don't want to leave it in the air because of the discussion. I really want to have an understanding of kind of what we can at least be comfortable with right now when it comes to that. Can one of the commissioners help me out as far as kind of what, since we've heard the different sections of what people think, what they're willing to kind of really consider now based off our discussion? I know that was kind of a loaded question.
Well, there's no reason why it can't proceed along two tracks.
Okay. That's good. That helps. So that
we don't get things sent into the black hole of disciplinary action, and you ask what's going on and they won't tell you. So, but there's no reason why you can't separate things that are purely disciplinary from things that have to do with the broader policy practice of the department. So I don't, it's both and could be a way of framing that.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Vice Chair Root?
Why don't you go to Kathy first?
Please, Commissioner Boyle, go ahead.
All right. Well, I understand that. I guess, and I think I want to think about this issue a little more. My question is, again, whether the determination needs to be made before any investigation begins. So that's one of my questions. And the other question I have is, do we really need a different protocol for the two different aspects or types of a complaint? So what's the advantage of having a different protocol for complaints regarding deficiencies in public department policy, in police department policies or practices? What's the advantage of having two different protocols? And, could we, instead of this language, require that the determination be made later on in the investigative process? So those are things I'm going to think about, because I'm not sure. I want to consider what Commissioner Williams said, but I think those are questions we need to ask regarding our recommendation to council.
I'm definitely with you.
One of those questions is there a disciplinary file created when a disciplinary investigation is started? And is that file protected by confidentiality rules?
I think we would have to talk to our labor attorney, because obviously if it's an ongoing investigation, there isn't a document that's completed yet. Once there's a discipline and something goes into someone's file, I think it's a different issue. Now, police have this sort of atypical situation where police personnel files are exempted under Bullard Plewicki Employee Right to Know Act, right? Where you have the personnel file. So I think that during an investigation would be one issue, but we can ask the specific question of what parts of an investigation file for police would be subject to disclosure or release. Yeah, it's not necessarily a very a simple answer.
That was certainly what motivated me when I was putting this together. I consider that disciplinary file as kind of a black hole that once it gets in there, it doesn't come out. And if we can keep things from going in there in the first place, we can keep things transparent.
Yeah. Well, with regular public employees, the personnel file can be looked at almost completely, including investigation or something like that. So that's not necessarily the case. But with police, they have special protections on their personnel file. But I don't know if that would cover a report or an investigation. And what I think that's where we got to this face sheet issue that Chris was referencing before, that the settlement of an internal investigation and what's disclosed. So we can check on that and get more clarification.
Thank you, City Manager and Commissioner Williams. Yes, Vice Chair Root.
These are both, I think, really fruitful points. Both this recent discussion between Eric and George Lahannas, and also Kathy Boyle's point. Another way of framing what we're wanting more information about is perhaps the complaint documentation and the personnel file. Because not only is there the complaint form, which George, you just mentioned, but we now have some experience of looking at case reports, looking at videos. There are things the public and the Oversight Commission will be able to see about complaints and about incidents. It isn't all in a black hole of going in somebody's personnel file. So maybe complaint records and personnel file would be another way to ask it. And then I was also, in regard to Kathy Boyle's point, I had a very similar idea. Let's try to think about whether there's some new language we can consider about other ways to bring up where the public can bring up issues of policy, in addition to that hearing, petition and hearing method. But if somebody as an individual wants to raise something to the commission or to the police department, can we conceive of some new way to describe that, that would be in the ordinance, and thinking in terms of what would be meaningful to somebody in the public?
Thank you, Vice Chair. So I'm thinking that, we want to get more back from the labor attorney. We have Vice Chair Root's comments and suggestion, and maybe separating the language with that. And then we have another commissioner who needs to process a little bit more. So is this one of the items on the list that maybe we can come back to, or do you feel comfortable or not comfortable leaving it to that and just, try to hammer this out right now? Because it sounds like we need to get a little bit more information. We need to process a little bit more and maybe come back to this in our next meeting is what I would propose. I see some head nods. I don't see any head nods going the other direction. So I'm going to, just for the sake of time, and because we got work to do, wait till we hear back from City Manager Lahannas and the labor attorney. Give us all a chance to kind of really think about it. And maybe if someone wants to create something to really show their examples, such as Vice Chair Root was talking about, that will help us be able to wrap our heads around it. Is that okay?
So besides the issue of the investigatory file and that, are we at the point where we would take this entire document and have our labor attorney weigh in? Because it's a pretty expansive, it's a pretty expansive list at this point. Or do we want to wait until you have compacted it more to a policy type document and then ask? What's the preference of the group? Because I don't want to start with a lengthy review from our labor attorney of a document, and then give you stuff back, and then you're back to working again. But I also don't want to wait and write until the end. Then you say, you know, well, I didn't know there would be a problem with any of this. You know what I mean? So what's the preference of the group here?
I would lean towards Commissioner Boyle and Commissioner Williams in regards to kind of how, because I don't know, or, you know,
We can
I'll do-
first look through this and just sort of give first impressions of things with questions and that sort of thing, and consider this, consider that. Maybe that's just a first shot. And then as we get a little bit more focused as towards a policy where you're going to recommend, maybe then we send it for the more comprehensive legal review. Does that work? I want to facilitate, but I don't want to bog down, right?
Say a couple of head nods, yes, City Manager, and then Commissioner Boyle wants to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to wait for a thorough review by the labor attorney until we really sort of have what we're going for put together.
Okay.
With that, I certainly would like the question about the existing complaint form that resulted from the settlement of a lawsuit. I would like to have that provided to us. Maybe it already has before I joined this committee, but I think we do need to know whether we're bound to use that complaint form, I think.
Okay.
I don't think it has been submitted before, so it wouldn't be something we've seen yet already. All right, is that correct, Vice Chair?
I haven't seen anything like that. And I really agree. You know, we've gone through 53 to 66 or something tonight, which I think is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. Having this kind of conversation in public and with each other. We need to go through the rest of the sections and, you know, other people's ideas that maybe aren't here together as in public, and then we'll be much closer to something that we'll be ready to take to the labor attorney and or the city attorney on, you know, various parts of it. And, you know, to keep getting input from the police leadership and city staff too. But, you know, we've got more work to do before we know what we're asking about.
Understood. Thank you, Vice Chair. So I'll go ahead and move on. All right, thank you. All right, this reminds me of when I was working on the disorderly conduct with another commission. We just were hammering through here. So if this is really painful for some of you, I'm sorry, but this is a great way to get the work done. Like Vice Chair Root was saying, and we'll be very happy with ourselves once we get through this process, because it'll be a good chunk of work that is looked at as a whole group. All right, so we'll go through item 59, I believe we're on, if I'm not mistaken. Complaint tracking. The police department will file a quarterly report with the commission on the status of each complaint investigation active in the department at any time during the quarter. B, the commission may inquire about the status of the complaints being investigated by the police department. And then we have reference points in the comment of that from Albany, New York. Reactions, comments, edits, thoughts on 59? As is? All right. That's our first one, I believe. All right, we are on item 60, mediation. The commission may facilitate mediation of a complaint involving two individual parties. If the individuals agree, the complaint will be closed and referred to mediation. B, the commission shall develop a procedure for mediation. And C, the city will cover the cost of mediation services, and then cite it from the Albany Municipal Code. And then the comment below that is this recommendation delegates to the commission the task of developing a mediation procedure rather than prescribing the procedure. All right, that was item 60. Any reactions, comments, changes, or concerns with 60? Commissioner Rowe and Commissioner Boyle, please go ahead.
Well, I may be stealing Kathy's thunder here, so I apologize, but I think the change that had been proposed before makes a lot of sense, that the complaint is paused rather than closed pending successful mediation.
Oh, yeah. Yes, Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. And I was just, in addition, was just going to comment, it says the city will cover the cost of mediation services, which of course would be part of this whole process. I think there may be some local community mediation services available at a reasonable cost. I believe the district court uses those now, and we might be able to use them for these police complaint mediations too. So don't have to put that in the writing, but just information of use.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle. Any other comments? I believe we're in consensus and everyone agrees with those highlights. Yes, Vice Chair Root.
I think a lot of people like the idea of including a mediation section. I wonder if anybody has wisdom to share about whether we'd be better off putting in either an example of how to do it, or, you know, developing a process, or whether council will be okay with saying that the commission will work out the procedures later.
You want to react to that, Commissioner Boyle and
No,
Commissioner Josephson?
I think if we're going to have mediation, we probably want a certified mediator, and they're going to have the procedures. The state court administrator's office certifies facilitative mediators. So we can either use those or any other trained professional mediation service, and they'll have procedures. So we won't have to actually specify those. Now, whether or not the city is going to, in the ordinance, specify where the mediation services are going to be obtained, I guess is up to them, but I don't think we have to include that in our recommendations.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle. Yes, thank you. Commissioner Josephson, I saw you raised your hand.
I just want to add that mediation is kind of a wide scope, and I feel like if we just include that they're capable, as the council and committee capable of being able to mediate, they can figure out how they choose to do that when they are set up and organizing their information.
Thank you, Ms. Josephson. Did you want to chime in, Commissioner Williams?
I'm sorry, you mean if the both individuals are capable of engaging in the mediation? Is that what your suggestion was?
My audio has cut out for a little bit. Are you referring to me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, my audio cut out. No, I was saying that the use of police mediation is kind of becoming a bit more as opposed to like other tactics. So I feel like if we just mention, like it is in this document and draft, that the commission can facilitate mediation, the commission can figure out further how to do that. I feel like we're simply just setting up parameters for a commission, so they should be able to figure out how they want to best do that, since it's kind of there's not one way to mediate.
Thank you, Commissioner Joseph, for that clarification. I think that satisfied Commissioner Williams's question. All right. Any other comments in regards to item 60? All right. I think we'll move on to item 61, findings on public mistreatment complaint. When the police department completes the investigation, but before the police department determines a deposition for the case, the investigator shall make one or more of the following findings with respect to each public mistreatment complaint. A, sustained, where the review discloses sufficient facts to prove the allegations made in the complaint. B, not sustained, where the review fails to disclose sufficient facts to prove or disprove the allegation made in the complaint. And C, exonerated, where the acts which provide the basis for the complaint occurred, but the review shows that such acts were proper. We have D, unfounded, where the review shows that the acts or acts complained of did not occur or were misconstrued. Also, we have E, deficient policy, practice, or training where the matter does not involve guilt or the lack thereof, but rather ineffective departmental policy or training to address the situation. If this finding is made, the department will produce a corrective action plan. F, no finding, where for example, the complainant failed to produce information to further the investigation, or where the investigation revealed that the other agency was responsible and the complaint or complainant has been referred to the agency, or where the complainant withdrew the complaint, or where the complainant is unavailable to clarify the complaint, or where the officer is no longer employed by the city. G, mediated, where the complaint is resolved by mediation. H, criminal, where the criminal investigation has been opened. And I, referred, where the complaint has been referred to another agency. And they just had some comments that involve the Albany Municipal Code. In Albany, the Ordinance Commission makes findings similar to the characterization given here, subsided there. And then below that, currently the East Lansing findings similar to the categorization given here are made only when the complaint is closed. And then furthermore, under a document that they have that is listed here, employee PDF document, under the system recommended here, the categorization will be made by the persons responsible for the investigation and before the police department takes final action. This should make the information generated by the investigation easier to deal with, more user-friendly. Commission is composed of volunteers who may not have the time or expertise to wade into the details of an investigation. All right, a lot there on this section, and I would like to hear for 61 responses. Yes, Commissioner Boyle, please go ahead.
I just wondered on I think I like the layout of this. I think it covers the whole 9 yards. But I'm wondering if under paragraph E, where it says deficient policy, practice, or training, deficient is kind of an imprecise word to me, and I'm wondering if we could change this to policy, practice, or training problem, where the matter does not involve guilt or lack thereof, but rather a problem with departmental policy or training to address the situation. So somebody's not making a call that something was deficient.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle. Any reactions to that change in language? Yes, Councilmember Bacon, please go ahead.
Just curious with the, who's this for? These are going to be the responses back to the public of what the findings were. I'll just say it's very policey, and I'm not sure it gives you the bang for that you're trying to get with the public. I don't know who this is for. Maybe someone can break that out for me.
Commissioner Boyle, please go ahead.
It says the investigator of the complaint is going to make this determination. So then the investigator would provide that determination to the department and to the commission.
Okay.
Maybe I should let Commissioner Williams speak instead, but that's the way I read it.
Does that help you out, Councilmember Bacon, for your understanding or your concern?
Maybe down the road, if we're saying what I don't see in the powers of the complainter, is there powers for like a broad complaint? What if the complaint's broadly against, maybe there's more places where the commission has more powers, more broadly against, if it's a broad systemic complaint, you're having trouble with the investigative powers and things along those lines. I like where you're going with this narrow section of it, but just that the powers of the commission broadly, I'm still not fully sure if I know what all those powers will be in lieu of working with the police. Say this seems under the assumption that we're never going to be adversarial from a position of doing any of this. I don't know if I see the adversarial powers anywhere so far, but I could be misinterpreting.
That's in 62.
It's coming.
It's coming.
Okay, here we go. Thank you.
Yes, Deputy Chief Gonzalez, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add something for context as to how the current process for the complaint investigation goes. Generally, the investigator, who is, a lieutenant, sometimes a captain, sometimes myself, will essentially be the finder of fact, and then make a recommendation to the chief on what the disposition really should be. But the chief currently has the final say to either support that finding, disagree with that finding, or even send the investigation back to the investigator for further follow-up or unanswered questions that the chief might identify. So I don't know if that helps kind of frame this discussion, but just because the investigator finds one way, it doesn't mean that it's written in stone and it can't be changed. There can be dissent and there can be further discussion on a finding of any individual complaint.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Gonzalez, for that context. Commissioner Williams, please go ahead.
And I think that was part of the thinking behind this was to have the commission. You'll see in the next session, this is where the commission gets to look at this document and make its recommendations or raise questions, so that it can raise a question before the police chief makes a final decision, and it will kind of maximize any input or influence that the commission would possibly have on the outcome of the investigation. The police chief has the final decision, and there's no way around that. But so that if you could get the commission sandwiched in there between the investigator's recommendation and the police chief's final decision, then that would kind of maximize the influence that the commission would have in the outcome.
Can I just jump in on that? I was trying to get to that earlier when I mentioned it, that I think it's going to be kind of difficult for people not to have the benefit of where the chief might be going with something. And there might be, it might help to sort of illuminate the thing, to have the chief be able to offer a preliminary recommendation or a preliminary decision, something to sort of synthesize the direction the chief is going or thinking, rather than to have sort of a more big investigation that everyone's got to look over and then try to figure out, well, which way would we go with this? What do we do with this thing? So I kind of think that having the chief weigh in beforehand, I understand why you're saying that, because once the chief has weighed in, you feel like the commission may have lost its ability to provide input. But maybe there's something you could do where it's a preliminary and it goes back to the chief before being finalized, but then the commission can see the benefit of the chief's thoughts or decision-making on it. And in terms of,
thanks, Lahannas.
There's a final step that comes to the city manager before the chief says, yes, that this happened or didn't happen in an investigation, but the final decision of discipline, discharge, that is finally rests with me. So that would be another step as well, but it's kind of mentioned in there as well.
Thank you. Any more comments, reactions, or clarification? Yes, Commissioner Rowe, please go ahead.
Under subsection E there, I think, again, we need to be careful about language, right? Where it says, where the matter does not involve guilt or lack thereof. I think we need to be careful about using the word guilt, implying some sort of criminal investigation, or even really using the word responsibility, which might connote some sort of civil litigation, right? So I'm not sure that I have a good word to use there, but I don't think guilt is where we want to go.
Do we have any suggestions or ideas about that language with guilt from any other commissioners?
That's verbatim from Albany, so your colleague in Albany might have a good answer to that. He wrote it.
Well, we could say employee misconduct instead of guilt or lack thereof.
Are you comfortable with that, Commissioner Harrell? Okay.
Yeah, I
So
think that
we're
was.
okay. All right. Good. Anything else for section 61? Yes, Vice Chair Root?
I'm not sure if it's relevant to this, but looking at letter I, where it talks about referred, where a complaint has been referred to another agency, I'm looking for a place to raise a question, which is what would happen if we have an oversight commission and we have a situation such as what happened with the Anthony Loggins complaint, where it was referred to the Michigan State Police. If that happened post Oversight Commission, would the Oversight Commission have any role in oversight, or would that be lost because of going to another system?
Yeah, and that was the question I had that I was saving, because I wanted to know exactly that process based on those circumstances. When you have, as Vice Chair Root was saying, it moved to a different investigatory body. Where does the oversight sit when, so if possible, City Manager Lahannas, Deputy Chief Gonzalez, or Chief Johnson?
When you put it to an outside investigator, it really is the same, basically the same portion that you're looking at. You're just having someone else do it. So when it comes back to the chief can still make a decision about it. In that situation, I think it was slightly different, and the chief can jump in on that one, because that involved a look to see if there were potential criminal charges or not. Whereas an internal investigation may or may not, it may be a policy violation or something of that nature. So that was the difference, but it kind of takes the place of your internal investigation in a way. Steve or Chief?
Yeah, that's correct. In the Anthony Loggins case, I think that really fit the bill for bullet point H here, where a criminal investigation had been opened, because that's what they were actually investigating, whether or not any criminal act had occurred. Referred where, bullet point I, referred where a complaint has been referred to another agency. That might be something that has to be flushed out a little bit, because is there a situation where a citizen's complaint that doesn't rise to the level of a criminal act or a potential criminal act, is there a situation where that citizen's complaint is going to be investigated by an outside agency? I think that, that point has to be flushed out, where and when would our police department, refer that out for just a citizen's complaint that doesn't have a potential criminal element to it.
I apologize, Deputy. Please go ahead. Maybe your question will clarify. Vice Chair Root.
This is a helpful conversation. It was sent to the MSP, as I recall, to see whether there was a criminal prosecution that should be made. It came back with a finding of exonerated. So it came back as a complaint. So that's is it H and I? And in any case, let's say that it happened the way it did, when it came back with an exonerated finding, would the Oversight Commission look at it or not? That's what I'm trying to figure out about how this policy would be implemented.
Sure, I don't know why they wouldn't. I mean, it'd just be the same as the internal investigation. They would just see that information.
Okay. I saw another hand earlier. Yes, Commissioner Ellsworth Etchinson, please go ahead.
And I guess my question is, and I've made this comment in previous meetings before, if there was a complaint referred to another agency, would that be an independent? Could that be an independent review agency as opposed to another police department? That's my issue. Is having, as I stated meetings ago, having police themselves, if you will.
Yeah, at this point, there isn't any opportunity for that because there aren't any agencies that do that type of work. So it just by the nature of the work, it is other police agencies. And you go to a different one because what you're looking for is the argument would be a greater level of independence because they don't know any of the people and they have no vested interest in it. So.
Thank you for that question and inquiry, Commissioner Ellsworth, Hutchison, City Manager. I apologize that it's very complex to me for some reason. So, so the Oversight Commission, when this is sent out to another agency, the Oversight Commission is still able to look at that information once everything is done, then to be able to determine what's going on. Are you saying that within that process, there's opportunity for the oversight to be able to have access? Because I know the internal investigation thing is real difficult to work around with as an independent body to look at an ongoing situation. So how do you classify that as ongoing to the other agency and it's still there? And so we're well past 90 days potentially with this, and how that is that, can you help me out with that, please?
I don't think an internal investigation sent elsewhere or one done internally would have any difference except that it went to somebody else. I don't think that would change if the commission were going to look at it at the tail end. I don't think that's going to change anything. I still think you can look at it just the same because the chief would still be the final decision maker if it was an internal investigation. Chief, do you have a different view on that?
No, I see the oversight committee, still going through the same procedures also. So I agree with Mr. Lahannas along those lines.
Okay, yeah, that's very, just from my personal perspective, that's very, very important. So we don't, we could have this transparency process no matter what is going on, and we have them being able to weigh in and probably address the community to a certain point in a way that allows them to be able to allow you to do what you need to do with these investigations. I think it's really, really important cosmetically, and I think it's good practice just from my personal perspective. So did anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Ellsworth, please go ahead. You're muted.
I was just wondering, I know we're almost to the end of this particular document. I think it goes to 68 or 69, but yet there's still a lot, even though the numbers are not that far apart, there's still a lot to review. And I'm wondering if we should table the rest to discuss later, as we've got a couple of more agenda items that we need to get through tonight.
How does other commissioners feel about tabling what we've talked about so far tonight and stopping at, just for records points, Diane, at 62, continuing discussion into our next meeting so we can get to the rest of our agenda. And we're looking for some head nods if that's something that you want to do as a commission. I see 2, 3, 4. I think we're in unison with that. And so the proposal is definitely granted in what you want to do. And I think the commissions are comfortable with that. So we'll stop here at 62 under line item 4.1, and we'll add that to the old business on the next agenda and consider the rest of what we have for the complaint process, just for clarification. Even though we're moving on, we don't have time to finish this thing. I just thought this was a great way. And I think hopefully we'll go further in doing it in some form or fashion in this way, just to get that work done. So we'll go ahead and move on to item 4.2, community input planning meeting. And I think the first thing that Vice Chair Root reminded me of is kind of really kind of understanding when we're going to actually do this thing, because I know in our last meeting we had made a determination and vote on March 2nd. Was it March 2nd? But we still have a conflict through another event happening that night. And so, just for general purposes, I kind of want to open that up to the commission to see where everyone was comfortable with that aspect, or if we wanted to think about maybe moving this to a different date or not. So in the last discussion, we had talked about try to move around from, I think, the MLK event, and it happened at a certain time. I think it was 7 o'clock. And then we thought, at least I thought that that was something we could do and move around, but ultimately for the schedules and the way that it's all set up is what it's going to be, and it's going to be at that time. And we had planned on doing that. So I want to open it up to the commission and anyone else, because Commissioner Ellsworth Edgerton and Vice Chair Root and I met and had a conversation in regards to the dates, and maybe they can also help explain what I'm talking about in regards to possibility and the reasons why we wouldn't want to look at the date of our community input meeting. Commissioner Ellsworth Edgerton or Vice Chair Root, do you want to chime in and kind of give some context to what we're talking about by chance?
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a pretty good job. It's the MLK Commission does have an event that night. I don't know that there's necessarily an overlap of the attendees that would attend the community conversation or not. Keep in mind that if we do move this event, I can't remember what the alternative date was. That's going to delay, that definitely will push things back a meeting or two for this body beyond that April 12th, I think was the date that was brought to us by City Council. So that's pretty much in a nutshell where we are.
Vice Chair Root, please go ahead.
I tried to look for an alternative date. And what I thought as a possibility to bring to the group might be March 18th, which is a Thursday. There is an Arts Commission meeting at 5:30. They almost never go longer than 2 hours and sometimes go much shorter. So we had said we might do a 7:30 to 9 meeting. So I thought maybe we could do it on the 18th. That does push it forward. I think, how much time, how many meetings we need to have is not exactly the same thing as when that community input meeting happens. So I think, the main thing is we need to decide whether to do it May 2nd, knowing that there will be a conflict with the speaker that the MLK Commission is organizing, who, just wasn't able to change the time, which is understandable, or whether we want to move it to March 18th so that we don't have a conflict that we are aware of that we would prefer not to have.
Can I just wait for a second here? Sorry.
Yes, please.
Nothing has gone out about this meeting, and March 2nd is very close to right now. And I'm just saying, because we stopped all the presses because of this other conflict with this meeting. So if we want to have some time for the public to know about it, I think we have to wait till a longer date than March 2nd. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Diane. Please go ahead, Ellsworth Edgerton, please.
Yeah, in my comment about if we go to March 18th date, I know that there's an April 12th deadline by City Council, but I also know that we have room as a commission to request to go beyond that date. My concern with the March 18th date and the April 12th date is I want to make sure that when we get the community input, that we have time to do something with that input. I don't want us to just be trying to push through some arbitrary date that was decided on back 6 months ago or whatever, and not have adequate time to actually do something meaningful with the feedback that we're going to get from the community. I don't want it to be just an exercise of futility. So that's what I'm putting that out on the table right now.
Thank you. And so we're talking about two different things that mean the same thing. If we're talking about moving this back a little bit, which You heard Diane kind of talk about why, the good reasons of kind of getting this out here and really getting something out of it. And then also really getting meaningful information from the community. The April 12th date and what we already have proposed in our schedule, it just doesn't work that way. We're not, I don't think we're able to really process all that in the right way that we want to do that for. And so we're not talking about another 6 months, but we may be talking about maybe another meeting or two extra than what we originally planned. This April 12th date to me is something that was set by council before we all did everything, before we all knew who we were and what we were doing. And there's no way to really gauge that. And we've got a tremendous amount of work done. And we've taken advantage of all the time that we had and the staff's time and not making sure that we were wasting time as much as possible. And so I think if we were to consider having a couple extra meetings, it would be worthwhile to everyone involved for the final outcome in regards to getting us to be able to turn around all this information in a way that's responsible. And then really appreciating the community's input, which, we haven't had at all really. And, it's one of the most important aspects of what we're doing this for is for the community. So I would kind of, based on what I just said there, I guess my question to you is anyone not really, have other commitments or not really unable, or that's just not going to work with what you want to be involved with, even though you've made this commitment so far and done the work you have, which is okay, that's just not going to be possible for you to continue on maybe a meeting or two. And this is with council's approval once we ask. This is assuming that we have the opportunity to do that. Yes, Vice Chair Root.
I think maybe at our next meeting, we might put on our agenda to look at our work plan for the next, to finish this task and see how much time we need as far as we're able to see. One other fact is that there are 5 Mondays in the month of March. So it's conceivable that we could meet March, the 2nd and 4th and 5th Mondays in March, and then there would be 2 weeks before our next meeting, the 2nd week of April. So one way we could pick up some time is to scoot another meeting in before April. We might still need a couple more after mid-April, but that's an option. So I think we'll be looking at it at our next meeting.
What were those dates you proposed, Chris?
We are already scheduled to meet the 2nd and 4th Mondays of March, as well as, finishing up February and getting into April. There happens to be a 5th Monday in March. So we could meet the 2nd, 4th, and 5th if people are available. And then to have again a 2-week break before the 2nd Monday in April.
Are you proposing using one of those dates then for your citizen engagement meetings?
No, that really would be pushing it long. I was suggesting, and I definitely want to get feedback on this, Thursday, March 18th at 7:30 after the Arts Commission meeting at 5:30. So there isn't a direct city conflict at that time, but I don't know, how it fits into y'all's schedule.
What I was just thinking was if you used your regular Monday night meeting, a Monday night for this, and then had other items on the agenda, if your citizen engagement was not as robust as you want, because we don't know if we're going to get 3 people or 20 people, that if it was shorter than you expected, you could still use the remainder of the meeting for productive time to try to continue on your work.
That's true.
But that's another thought for
if we have it on the 18th, I would really encourage people, well, no matter when we have it, try to bring 5 people. Really, this is our only time to do it. I've certainly got 5 people who care about this. If we use the regular processes of publicity for the city, and a number of us know of various other email lists that should be interested. And if we can think about, neighbors you've talked to or people in book groups or whatever who care about it, this is the time to say, we really need your input. I think if we tell people it's important and we want to hear from them, we can bring some people out. I don't want to give up on that.
I'd love to hear from some other commissioners, their thoughts, concerns, or support of what you've heard so far. Because to me, I really want to be respectful to your commitment, respectful to your lives, but also not fail the community and what we were charged to do. Not community, but the council, city, and the community, what we're charged to do to get this work done in a way that includes everyone, and we can be proud of that. So I'd love to hear from some other people, if you feel comfortable talking about it at all, or your thoughts that'll really help us kind of understand what we want to do and not want to do. Yes, Commissioner Colwood, thank you for saving me on my island.
I have just my own conflicts, like the March 18th date. I'm actually giving a talk on that day. So I don't know how many bodies. I mean, I imagine ideally we would want to have everyone there, but that specifically would be a date that I just wouldn't be able to do. And then as far as pushing it out, my own transparency, I was approved to take the board exam for licensure. And so that's actually happening now. And I will continue to give as much as I can, but it's just sometimes I might have to pull back beyond the April 12th date.
Okay. That's what we need to hear, and respect. And then so the other thing that was proposed by the city manager was like maybe trying to use a Monday / meeting, or looking at just specifically at that Thursday, the 18th, and going with that. What is some feedback on that? Is it fair to assume that outside of Commissioner Callwood, the 18th works for everyone in regards to what they want to do in the commitment, and then entertaining possibly doing 1 or 2 meetings ongoing after that, if we don't do the extended Monday extra, squeeze that in there? Is anyone against that by chance for one reason or another? It'll be something that we end up voting on, so we'll hear from, we'll know regardless, but I want to understand, so people are comfortable with it. And so I'm going to take your silence as, okay, just give me whatever you got, because I'm good with what I'm doing. So, but I don't want to do it necessarily that way. So, is there any other comments or any other issues? Because for this public meeting, just to kind of give you an idea, is we're going to need participation from the group. In note-taking, facilitating, and things like that. So it's going to be a very interactive process. And so, obviously having everyone there, or as much people as we can there, is going to be important, because as Vice Chair Root talked about, I got at least, I know 10 people that will come in and make comments in their input from a community standpoint. And I know Commissioner Ellsworth Hutchinson's got a whole crew of people that she could talk with. So we'll need you to be involved. So if you don't have anything going on, we'll just assume and expect that you're there. But I guess, are we at a point where if I don't hear anything back for the proposed changing from the 2nd to the 18th initially is what we want to do or don't want to do? And that's what we'll have to vote on, because we've already voted on the 2nd as our time. As Diane had already said, sorry to be talking so long-winded, nothing's been put out. No one knows anything about this as far as the date's concerned. We wouldn't be putting anyone's commitment out who was going to initially do this or not. So we're safe in that regard. So it's just really appreciating everyone else that's in front of us and staff with this as well. So staff, please, communicate as well about your concerns as City Manager Lahannas has done, and make suggestions if you have any in regards to that as well. Yes, Commissioner Ellsworth Hutchinson.
One of the other things that we'll need this body's help with before we take the vote is, the city will help us with the marketing and instead of just doing a Facebook post, we'll also create a Facebook invite. And so for those of you that have social media, that would be another way to engage the audience or get participation to come, rather, is to share that, put that on your page, and then go through your page and hit invite and start to invite people to it. That way it will remind them as the event gets closer so that they won't forget about it, as opposed to just being a Facebook post where there will be no reminders. So this way it will help serve as that. It will help us gauge the interest. While it's not an official RSVP platform, it will help us gauge the interest, because people will be selecting if they're either interested, they're going, or they're not going. We talked, Commissioner Root and Rigsby and I talked about, we could put the link to the meeting in that invite so that they can click on that then to go ahead and RSVP. So an RSVP link in there. So we just had that conversation late Friday on that part of it. So we will need you guys help in just not bringing somebody there and facilitating, but also sharing it in advance to help promote the event.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison. Yes, Vice Chair Root.
While we're talking about what we're needing help on, there's one other thing, which there's an advantage of our agreeing to the 18th, and which is the direction we're going in, because the next item on our agenda is going over questions to pose in this group, in this event. If we decide on the 18th, we can do that at our next meeting. Instead of trying to do it tonight. Chuck and Kelly and I just got really squeezed out and didn't get those questions she's sent out to you in advance. They were, Diane, bless her heart, sent them this afternoon, but I'm sure most folks didn't get a chance to read and think about it. But if we aren't doing it on the 2nd, that means we can have time to look at those questions and have a little bit of discussion at our next meeting, which we will really appreciate.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So is there any motion on the table for this community input, the date change?
Chuck, can I make one comment, please?
Yes, please.
Just from a tech standpoint, it would be helpful to not have to turn around immediately at the end of the Art Commission into this meeting. So I would like to propose, perhaps if the Art Commission starts at 5:30, usually takes 2 hours, that this start no sooner than 8 p.m., which I know is late, but I want to make sure I have ample time to get the tech set up for you.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, I think at this point in time, it's, we're gonna have to make best with what's due there.
It's really late. We might might pick a different date. That's really late.
The challenge is the
7:30 was
schedule.
already pushing it too late, but that's really late. So we might need to look at some other date.
Yeah.
Challenge is
Thank
all
you for
the
that,
other,
Justin.
the other meetings that we have going on in the city, and just kind of really not hitting that up. So it's, I mean, it may go back to City Manager Lahannas' suggestion in regards to one of those Mondays, and just taking advantage of that. And then still just adding a couple more meetings on the end there and making best what's due with what we already have slotted or slated. What do you think?
So that speaks to putting it at the 5th Monday of March?
Does that avoid the conflict with the school board, the 5th? I think
so. I don't think a lot of folks schedule things on the 5th of anything.
I think so. So that would be an open Monday then, which
Yeah, that feels a really long time away, but 8 o'clock does sound, inviting people to stay with us until 9:30 sounds pretty hard.
So when you think about the 5th, are we talking about starting at the 6 o'clock time frame and then just turn that meeting into the input meeting? Is that how we're looking at it, or a hybrid of what we're doing that night?
What do people think will be more popular, 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock for starting?
Or we could split the difference and go 6:30.
Yeah, what are people's wisdom?
Well, I like the idea of doing it when our regular scheduled meeting is, or at least at the time when it would be if we had one on the 5th Monday. We know that our calendars are clear. As long as there's no tech competing meeting on that 5th Monday, then we're good to go on that. So to me, it seems like a natural. So
that's as good a reason as any. Justin, would that work for you? 6 o'clock on the 5th Monday of March?
It certainly works for me at this time. I don't see any other reservations for the Zoom account at that time.
Okay. And, this will enable us to share more about where we're headed. We'll be clearer on what we're asking for comments on. We can, look at it that way too.
Any other comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion. We'll have to vote from current date to that new date, which is the 5th of March, 2021 at 6 o'clock, would be what the motion would entail.
It would be March 29th.
Oh, March 29th?
The 5th Monday.
For the community input? The 29th?
So.
Oh, where did I get the 5th from?
Because you heard 5th Monday.
Oh, okay. Wow, is that okay with you?
We're doing the best we can.
Okay, well, we're gonna find out if it's okay with you or not. If there's a motion on the table, on the floor to be made in regards to that. 29th.
we don't have a motion yet. Do we not have a motion?
We don't have a motion because as of now, we're still having it on the 2nd.
Okay. Well, in order to get discussion and weigh in, I'll move that we move the community input session to the 5th Monday in March, commencing at 6 p.m.
There's a second? Okay, moved by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Josephson. Is there any discussion on the motion on the floor? I don't have anything, but if that's all the best we have, the 29th, it's so far away. But I don't know if that matters what I think about that. But is there any discussion on that? Yes, Commissioner Ellsworth Hutchinson.
You sound like you want some discussion on the date because you're a little shell shocked. So is there a different date that you were going to propose?
No, I just set myself up for some reason. I heard the 5th and I'm not looking at my calendar, and I just was really excited that, we can get it in a little bit sooner rather than later, and then it ends up being actually later. But I'm not, it's not a battle that I need to have, and just more opportunity to promote, I guess, and make the best of the situation is what I'm at right that. So, but anyone else, you can forget about my personal, all right, so
I guess
yes, please.
Between now and the next meeting, we could look at the city calendar in March and see if there's a closer date. We're not going to start publicizing now for something March 29th anyway.
Does the 22nd, your meeting, could you have a meeting on the 22nd already? Does that work for you, or does that not work for the group?
That's the school board problem.
That's a
I just want to say, I don't think there's a perfect solution to this, whether there's a conflict with school board, whether if it's too late, like some things just aren't going to work out perfectly. And I feel like this is an important meeting. So what we're prioritizing is citizen, input. I think not having any conflict is most important. And I think we're achieving that goal at least. So I think just for like the sake of where we're at now, I would say, even if we wanted to look online on the calendar and see if there's another date, like we can do that, but we can say temporarily we can have a meeting for the 29th if we want to look into it further, just so we have something.
Commissioner Rowe, thank you, Commissioner Josephson.
I think, Chuck, just to put your mind at ease, the way that I'm looking at this is this gives us an opportunity on the 8th to address more of these section 4 issues. And then also on the 8th, nail down, these are the things that absolutely must be done by the end of our meeting on the 22nd, so that we have a product at the end of the meeting on the 22nd to distribute to the public on an agenda, so that they have, some time to look at those things before we solicit their input on the 29th.
Not sure we can do that. I'm not sure we'll have something clean to solicit input. We'll have to figure that out.
Even if it's, sort of like a 2-pager of bulleted points, this is
Right.
Where we're at right now.
That does become more possible with a later date. You're absolutely right.
I'm sold. Is there any other discussion in regards to the motion on the floor for changing the meeting to the 5th Monday, or the 5th Monday of the March 29th date, 2021 at 6 p.m. For our community input meeting scheduled? Please raise your hand and also to this vote so I can see, make sure it's clear and clean. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, so moved. Thanks for that. We had to get that hammered out. So that kind of makes the questions that we have that was entered last minute, which is, I'll take responsibility for that. We had a meeting on Friday and I just didn't put 2 and 2 together about what Commissioner Ellsworth wanted me to do. And thankfully, Vice Chair Root let me know that. So I apologize for you not having that sooner. That's all on me. But we have time now. So I got away with one. So we'll go ahead and save that. And then also those questions, they're not, and I'm speaking for myself, not for Vice Chair Root or Ellsworth Etchison. These questions are just kind of really what we had talked about and what our expectations were in general. So I would love to have more input based on what you see there, as well as far as what you think maybe we could focus on and maybe submit that. So we'll have that in advance to our next meeting or our meetings that we have when this planning is going, getting put together as we go further, to make sure that we have a consensus on what we want to get out of that. Because I think there's a little bit of where we are looking at this community input meeting as far as finding out what the community wants to, how they view the police and their different things that they're doing, and what they expect from the commission, the Oversight Commission, and how their role should be in the community. So some of the questions, in my opinion, may be very, very diverse. And I think if we have those and can talk about that, or kind of get a feel for what everyone's thinking on that, it'd be really, really helpful to the discussion. That sound okay? Okay. All right. Anything else? Yes, Vice Chair Root.
I think, Cedric has brought up the possibility of thinking differently about what kind of input we ask for from people, that we may be able to ask them to respond to some specific recommendations from us. So we keep an open mind, and please share, next meeting, whatever you think might be best, even if it has nothing to do with the questions page, or, maybe picking and choosing a little bit from that and a little bit from some bullet points of our recommendations for people to react to.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Anyone else before we move on? All right, thank you. And thanks for everyone's input and patience working through that. All right, so we'll add to item 4.3, city RFP report by City Manager Lahannas. He had asked to put this on the agenda, so I'll let him lay this out for us and kind of, let us know where he's at with that and what he's thinking.
I'll turn it over to Chief Johnson quick for his input on it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lahannas. We 2 weeks ago, I think Mr. Lahannas sent this RFP recommendation to the commission to review, and there was some discussion reference. It wasn't that quite necessary at the time of crunching numbers and things like that. The numbers are what they are, and I accept your recommendations and your guidance on those. But I reapproached my boss and asked for us to look at these numbers from a more of an objective standpoint. And there's actual training that is going on around the country dealing with fair and impartial policing. And we want to make sure, I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to gather the necessary information from an outside objective consultant, look at our numbers from 2020 and see what they can come up with, reference what's going on in our department, and recommend some fair and impartial policing initiatives that we can undertake going forward. And we all have our certain perspectives on these numbers, and we can all make these determinations what they are. I don't have an answer as to what these numbers mean. I think there's an opportunity for us to actually gather different kind of data that this outside consultant can actually recommend to us, saying you're not gathering this or you're not gathering this. Maybe we try and gather this as we're going forward. And so I'm looking forward, because what we're gathering now, it's adequate, but I think we can actually gather some more. But having someone outside coming in to help us with this, from my standpoint, coming in from I just got here 5 months ago, but I would feel more comfortable if I could have some more objectivity and some guidance of how I can move this department forward. And I just reintroduced the RFP to my boss, and he recommended that we put it back and just bring it up to your eyes again, just out of respect for the work that you guys are doing to help us out. So that's just my 2 cents on me reintroducing the RFP back to your group for your eyes.
Thank you, Chief Johnson.
You're welcome.
Does any commissioners want to weigh in on to what they saw in the RFP and comment on what has been reintroduced to us? Yes, Vice Chair Root.
Hearing your commitment to getting assistance is certainly positive. And I think perhaps moving away from spending tens of thousands of dollars at trying to estimate the population counts, could be a good thing. I think also I hear you're saying there really are data issues that could use some attention. And I agree with that. I have a little concern that it is so open-ended now that I don't know what you're going to get, from people in a response. So if there is a way that you can be more specific about what you're looking for, I think you'll have a better chance of finding it, because people will, can't just intuit it.
Right. That's great point.
One thought that occurred to me is some folks who look at the problem of traffic stops say, rather than spinning your wheels, if I could use that image of, looking for the denominator, looking at all those statistics, look at what to do about it, and one of those paths is an early intervention system, which I know is on your agenda anyway, because of the accreditation and maybe other reasons. I don't know enough about how to set up an early intervention system and whether, what data you include in that, what indicators, what data do you need from your systems to make sure you're going to be able to put in the indicators you need, figuring out what the thresholds are. I don't know if that's a way to be more specific that would help you.
Yeah.
It's something to consider.
Yeah, that's true. It can't hurt. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Great input. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Rowe, please go ahead.
Well, I say I certainly appreciate the commitment to keeping at this so that we can more clearly define what it is that we're looking for, right? I would echo Vice Chair Root's points that, fair and equitable policing, right? So let me backtrack. Potentially what we want to do is look at some of that ongoing training regarding fair and equitable policing to see, what are those indicators? What are those marks that we might want to hit? And sometimes those are fairly broad, right? Not like I've said before, no one can give you a specific number that says, you have to be below this percentage, and that means that you're doing fair and equitable policing, right? So any data collection that occurs doesn't necessarily need to be in service of meeting that specific number. Rather, it's more along the lines of how do we do things better, right? To a certain extent, and this is true of any occupation, regardless of what the metric is, things could always be improved, right? But when you're talking about what is a fairly emotional, to a certain extent, subjective issue, it's hard to get specific data points that are going to address that fact, right? And as Vice Chair Root alluded to, Sam Walker, who is sort of, the nation's premier expert in accountability, has specifically said in a number of instances that there is no magic number to aim for, right? So I think the utility of having somebody come in and analyze this from the outside is, right, to sort of look at what is that current ongoing training that you're potentially undergoing? What are those moves that you're making towards accreditation? And how do those mesh up with what you're currently doing? How do we improve those processes by improving some of these policies, practices, trainings, right? And that may be specific recommendations like, every officer needs to attend de-escalation training, or, first line supervisors, right? Sergeants, right? These are things that need to be discussed at roll call, or whatever those specific issues are that get addressed that don't necessarily require us having some number to attach to those, right? As a social scientist, I always find data useful, and I'll take whatever data I can get, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's always necessary.
So I just want to jump in and say, I think that the idea here, and I've heard from all of you and appreciate that, is to look to strategies to improve, to be able to give the department more tools from an outside consultant who can say, what steps and techniques can we take to move the dial on this, to start the improvement that we all admit we want to see. So that really is what I see as it. So less about a number trying to defend or to justify, which is the concern we heard 2 weeks ago, which is certainly a legitimate one, because that's not what we want to pay a consultant to come up with a number for us, but really to give us steps and tools to improve. It's things like the policy on not running lean checks indiscriminately. Are there more things like that we should be doing that will help move the dial in terms of more equity in terms of our traffic enforcement and so on? So I think you all get it. So thanks.
Yeah, and thanks, commissioners, for saying that way better than I could ever conceive of saying that. Because I was, initially, you guys know, I think by now, kind of how I felt about it, and just more data and what's that mean. It's like, well, how do we fix this is more where I'm at now. And so I just really, I really respect the fact of the matter that you guys brought this back. Chief Johnson, you're really working hard and trying to get understanding and better, improving what you have to work with. And City Manager Lahannas also for backing that and listening to us and listening to people who are a little bit smarter than I am to talk about some of these different things and really help us out with that. So I'm just really grateful and appreciative of the process, and hope to continue to keep having these types of ways to have us come together and come out with a great product at the end. So that's all I had to say of that. Does any other commissioners have anything else to say?
I just want
yes,
to
Chief Johnson.
I just want to thanks for the input. We'll tighten up this RFP this week, and like you said, I think we'll get some people coming in to give us some proposals. So thanks for the input. That really helps us.
All right. Anything else anyone else has for item 4.3? And then, so, I'll just say this. I don't know if any commissioners want to follow up and send something in to staff in a more, once you had a chance to kind of, do your thing with your mind with that. I think they're open to that is what I'm hearing. And so please do that. Don't hesitate to utilize those skills. I'll move on to item number 5, commissioner announcements. Does anyone have anything more to add to tonight's discussion that we have this evening? Yes, Vice Chair Root.
I always try to think about what are we going to do next time so we can be on the same page. I think we're starting with number 61 or 62 of Eric's draft and going to the end. And then we will start maybe at the beginning since we started about 2/3 of the way through. Does that make sense?
Yes. 62 is what we left out on. So
we'll go 62 to the end and then we'll start at the beginning. I think it was a really, really valuable public discussion tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Anyone else? All right, I just have about 15 things I want to kind of get out. Just kidding on that. We'll move to item number 6. If there's anyone who is open and entertaining adjournment, please let me know.
I can make a motion.
Moved by Commissioner Josephson. Is there a second? Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Callwood. And thanks, staff. Thank you, commissioners, for your hard work tonight. We really appreciate you, and thanks for your flexibility for everything that we have going on with this work. I think, as I've said before, we're all going to look back on this and really be proud of ourselves about being part of something that's really bigger than us. So thank you so much. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Have a good evening, everyone. Take care.